She was 18 years old when everything changed. One moment, she was just another girl scraping by in a forgotten frontier valley, and the next, she was standing at the center of a conflict that could destroy two entire worlds. But here's the thing, nobody saw coming. The real danger wasn't the marriage itself. It was what came after the vows were spoken. Her name was Leora, and the whispers started the day Keaton arrived at her door. People said she had no business marrying an Apache warrior. They said she did it out of fear, out of desperation, maybe even out of some twisted fate she couldn't escape. But they were all wrong. She married him because when their eyes met that first time, she saw something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She saw a man who carried wounds so deep they'd never fully heal. And somehow, she knew her story was tied to his in ways she couldn't yet understand. Keaton wasn't just any warrior. He was the kind of man whose presence made other men step back without him saying a single word. Tall, watchful, dangerous. His tribe respected him. Settlers feared him. And Leora? She was about to become his wife because of a promise her dead father made years ago. A promise nobody had bothered to explain to her, until it was too late to run. The wedding happened fast. Too fast. One sunrise, Keaton appeared with tradition weighing heavy on his shoulders, asking her mother for Leora's hand. The valley erupted in chaos. People expected Leora to break down, to refuse, to flee into the night. Instead, she stood there, looked Keaton straight in the eyes, and nodded. Just like that. No tears. No drama. Just a quiet acceptance that made even Keaton pause. But what nobody knew, what Leora herself didn't know yet, was that this wedding would trigger a chain of events that would leave blood on the ground before the week was over. The ceremony took place in a circle of firelight on open land. Apache elders prayed in their ancient language while wind pushed warm dust around their feet. Leora felt the flames glow against her skin and wondered if this moment had been waiting for her all along. When Keaton took her hand, his touch was surprisingly gentle, patient, as if he understood her fear without needing her to speak it aloud. Everyone noticed how he looked at her that night. Not with possession, but with something deeper. Something protective and primal that grew stronger every time she glanced back at him. They barely spoke, but the silence between them wasn't empty. It felt like a rope slowly tightening, pulling their fates together whether they wanted it or not. And then the fire died down. The guests drifted away. And Leora stood alone with Keaton near the dying embers, knowing that what came next would change her forever. When they reached his lodge, built from hides and timber, Leora froze at the doorway. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but nothing prepared her for what she saw inside. The room was warm, lit by a single soft flame. Thick furs covered the floor. And in the corner sat a massive bed, wider and stronger than anything she'd ever seen. That bed was the center of every whisper in town. People claimed an Apache warrior's bed was a place a young woman should fear, not because of violence, but because of the storm of emotions it held. Too close, too intimate, too unknown. Leora remembered every rumor as she stood there, her breath trembling in her chest. Then Keaton stepped behind her, close enough that she felt his warmth near her hair. His voice, low and deep, brushed against her ear. "You do not need to fear me. Not tonight. Not any night. Only speak, and I will listen." The kindness in his tone unnerved her more than harshness would have. She'd prepared herself for a strong man, maybe even a cold one, but not a gentle warrior whose touch held more quiet strength than any weapon he carried. When she turned toward him, she saw softness in his eyes she never expected. The warrior so many feared now looked at her as if she was the only thing in the room that mattered. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to step away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. Her breath caught. This was the moment she'd feared and imagined. The moment that would change something inside her forever. Her pulse raced, not from dread, but from something new. Something warm that made her knees unsteady. "You are safe here, Leora," Keaton said quietly. "Safe with me." His words should have eased her heart. Instead, They stirred a flood of questions she couldn't voice. Why did he look at her like he'd been waiting for her all his life? Why did he hold her like she was precious? Why did her chest tighten every time he breathed near her? Leora understood then why the bed had frightened her. It wasn't the bed itself. It was the closeness it promised. The truth she'd have to face about herself and about this man who now stood before her. But before she could speak, a sharp noise cracked through the night outside the lodge, like a branch breaking under heavy weight. Keaton's expression changed instantly. The softness vanished. His warrior instinct rose fast and fierce as he turned toward the sound. Leora froze, her heart pounding. He lifted his hand silently, commanding her not to move. The flame flickered. The wind pressed against the hide walls. The sound came again, louder this time, closer. Something, or someone, was outside their home, and Keaton knew exactly who it might be. He reached for his knife. Leora stepped back, breath tight in her throat. Their wedding night was no longer just about fear of the unknown. Something dangerous was coming toward them, and it had been waiting for the moment she became his wife. Keaton stood at the entrance like a stone carved by centuries of storms, his hand firm on his knife. Leora watched from near the fire as every muscle in his body went taut. She'd seen him as a warrior before, but never like this. Never with this sudden sharpness that tightened his jaw and turned his eyes cold. Something outside had stirred a part of him she hadn't yet learned. Not fierce anger, not fear. Something older. Something buried deep in Apache blood and frontier law. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe like an ordinary man. Every sense turned outward to catch the smallest sign. Leora stepped closer. Keaton raised his hand again, stopping her. She obeyed, but her eyes stayed locked on his back. Outside, the night stretched wide over the land, filled with sounds most people never heard. She knew the usual noises of the plains, the cry of wind, the call of night birds, the rustle of dry grass. But this sound was different, heavy, purposeful. Finally, Keaton pushed the door flap aside. Cold air rushed in, brushing Leora's skin like an unwelcome hand. He moved out into the darkness without a sound, the way only trained men do. Leora hesitated for a breath, then followed him to the doorway, staying just far enough back to keep from slowing him down. Outside, the land stretched in deep night. The moon had slipped behind clouds, leaving only thin strips of silver across the ground. Keaton stood still, listening. Leora could barely see his silhouette, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. A moment later, he knelt and ran his fingers across the dirt. He lifted his hand to his face, smelling something only he could read. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. There were men here, 2 of them. Leora felt her stomach tighten. She looked around but saw nothing except brush and shadow. How long were they here? Long enough, he said, rising slowly. The trail leads back toward the ridge. She stepped beside him, careful not to touch him while his senses were high and sharp. Who would come here tonight? Many can come to a warrior's land, he answered, his eyes fixed on the dark fields. Some come with respect, some come with warning, some come with danger. Leora shivered at the tone in his voice. She'd heard settlers speak of raiders, bounty hunters, men looking to stir trouble between tribes. But she sensed this wasn't just random mischief. Something felt personal. Keaton's stance told her so. He motioned toward the lodge, guiding her back inside with a firm hand on her arm. She stepped in without protest. He followed, letting the door flap fall closed behind them. Leora stood near the fire again. Keaton remained by the entrance, staring at the door as if the night itself needed watching. She had so many questions rising inside her, but she knew better than to bury him under them now. Still, silence felt too tight around her. She finally asked, soft as breath, "Does this have to do with why you came for me? Before the wedding?" Keaton's head turned slowly. His eyes met hers. The firelight caught the deep brown of his gaze, turning it warm for a moment before the shadows returned. "Leora, you and I were tied by a promise made long before you were born. But promises do not bring trouble. Men do. She stepped closer. What men? He hesitated, as if weighing how much truth she was ready to carry. Then he answered, "There are those who think our marriage gives them reason to question old agreements. Some fear the bond between my people and yours. Some hate it." Leora swallowed. Her father never told her the full story behind the agreement. She only knew there was an understanding between her family and Keaton's people, one forged in fire and loyalty. Keaton's voice softened as he continued, "Your father saved the life of my uncle in a time when bloodshed ruled this land. They made a pact, a bond of peace between two families. But peace is not loved by all." Leora tried to picture her father, a man she lost too young, standing beside warriors and forging such a promise. She'd never imagined his past reached so far beyond their small cabin. Before she could speak again, Keaton stepped closer. He looked at the fire a long moment before continuing. "The men who came here tonight were hunting for a sign. They want to know if our union makes me weak or strong, if you are a shield for me or a chain." Her breath caught. A chain. "Some men see love as weakness," he said with a slow breath. "Some see marriage as a way to strike at a warrior's heart." Leora felt her pulse race. She'd known fear before, but never this kind. Not fear of harm, but fear of being tangled in a deeper war she never meant to step into. Keaton watched her carefully, reading the worry that rose in her eyes. "I will not let them touch you," he said. His voice held no dramatic weight, no bragging tone. It was a simple truth spoken by a man who'd already given his life to this vow. She felt warmth rush through her chest, mixing with fear, forming something new. But she still had questions. "Keaton," she whispered. "What did they want?" His jaw tightened. "They wanted to know if you are truly mine now." Leora froze. Her cheeks warmed. Her breath slipped unevenly. The meaning behind his words ran deeper than the surface. Tonight was their first night as husband and wife. In Apache tradition and frontier belief, a marriage wasn't fully recognized until it was sealed by the bond between two souls. Some men believed a warrior was vulnerable before that moment. Others believed he was more dangerous. Her heart began to thump in her chest. "So they came because they thought you would be distracted?" "Yes." Her breath shook a little. "And were you?" Keaton stepped closer, slow and sure. The firelight warmed the angles of his face. His eyes held a calm she couldn't look away from. "I was watchful," he said. "Not distracted. I knew someone might test this night." She looked at the ground, then back up at him. "This marriage is more than I understood." Keaton's gaze softened for the first time since the noise outside. "It is more than what most in your valley understood." Leora walked toward the fire, letting the warmth reach her chilled skin. The weight of everything she'd learned swirled through her chest. Her father's pact, Keaton's bloodline, the men who hid in the night, her own place in this union that held history older than she knew. She looked up again as Keaton moved toward the wall, placing his weapons on a stand carved from wood and bone. He touched each one with quiet focus, checking for damage. Leora watched him, seeing the man behind the legend. The warrior who lived with the knowledge that trouble waited for him on every horizon. The man who now tied his future to hers. "Keaton." He turned. She hesitated before speaking. "What if those men come back?" "They will," he answered simply. "Those who test a warrior never stop with one night." Her heart tightened. She stepped closer, wanting to feel closer to understanding him. "Why do they hate this union so much?" He took a slow breath. "Because you bridge two worlds, Leora. And there are men on both sides who fear the bridge more than the war." His words lingered in the warm air between them. She stared at him, trying to process the weight of being the center of a conflict she never invited. Yet strangely, she didn't feel regret. Instead, she felt something stirring in her, something sharp and new and alive. Before she could speak, the wind outside shifted again. This time the sound was different. A distant drum. Slow. Heavy. Unmistakable. Keaton's head snapped toward the door. Leora's breath froze. A drum in the night meant only one thing. Someone was sending a message, and the message was meant for Keaton. The drumbeat rolled through the night like a slow heartbeat across the valley. Leora felt it thrum through the wooden floor beneath her feet, steady and deliberate, as if someone far away was calling out to the land itself. Keaton stood completely still, listening hard. The fire cast long shadows across his face, sharpening the lines of tension already carved into his jaw. Leora had heard drums at festivals before, at peace gatherings, at celebrations. But this sound was different. There was no joy in it, no rise or fall, no invitation for dance. It carried weight, warning, decision, the kind of sound men made when they wanted to be heard without speaking. Keaton stepped closer to the door, his shoulders tense. He didn't move beyond the threshold yet, and that alone scared her more than the drum itself. She walked toward him slowly. "What does it mean?" Keaton didn't look back at her right away. When he did, his eyes had shifted from warm earth to something sharper, something filled with memory. "It is a call to council," he said. "Not for celebration, for judgment." The word felt heavy. Judgment. Her breath tightened. "For you?" He nodded once. "And for anyone tied to me." The fire crackled behind them, but it no longer felt warm. Leora wrapped her arms around herself, though she wasn't sure if she was cold or simply shaken. "Who is calling you?" Keaton stepped outside. Leora followed him to the doorway. He scanned the sky, listening for the rhythm again. The drumbeat carried a pattern unique to certain clans. "It is Hawk Ridge," he said. "They want my presence." Leora remembered the stories she'd heard whispered by settlers. Hawk Ridge was known for strict warriors, men who followed the old ways to the letter. They tolerated no broken promises, no weak bonds, no divided loyalty. Some said they lived by law older than the land itself. Others said they held anger that never cooled. Keaton looked out over the ridge. The wind tugged at the hide strands in his hair. "Hawk Ridge does not call for talk unless something threatens balance." Leora swallowed hard. "And they think our marriage threatens it?" Keaton didn't answer at first. His silence was enough. As the drum beats continued, Leora's thoughts spun toward the men who had come earlier. Men who believed she was a chain around Keaton's strength. Men who questioned his loyalty. Men who hated the bridge he represented between two worlds. Keaton finally stepped back inside, closing the hide door behind him. He didn't pace. He didn't show fear. He settled on one knee near the fire and stared into the flames with a heavy gaze. Leora sat across from him, nervously twisting her fingers together. "Tell me everything," she said quietly. He drew a slow breath, as if preparing to reveal something buried deep. "My uncle, the one your father saved, was a respected elder among our people." His voice carried weight, even in Hawk Ridge. "When the pact was made between him and your father, the valley entered a time of peace. Trade became safe, travel became safe. But when he died 2 winters ago, the men who opposed the pact began to rise again." Leora leaned forward. "And they blame you?" "I carry his blood," Keaton said. "They believe I should follow his path or abandon it. They do not accept a path between." Leora felt the words cut deeper than she expected. A path between. That was exactly what she represented. A mixture of 2 worlds tied to him by vows old and new. The men outside wanted him to choose one world and leave the other behind. Her presence made that choice impossible. The wind outside rattled the walls. The drumbeat continued, steady and slow, like a challenge whispered across the plains. "What will they ask of you at this council?" she asked. Keaton looked directly at her now. "They will ask if I stand with Hawk Ridge or with the valley. They will ask if our marriage is loyalty or betrayal. They will ask if you weaken me or strengthen me." Leora's breath hitched. "And what will you say?" Keaton didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because the truth was complicated, tangled in history and honor. His silence frightened her more than a storm. He finally stood and reached for his cloak. "I must go to them tonight." "Tonight?" she whispered. "The drum calls tonight," he said. "If I delay..." They will take it as refusal. Leora rose quickly, her heart heavy. The thought of him walking into the darkness alone chilled her more than the night air. What if they try to hurt you? Keaton fastened the cloak around his shoulders. Then they will see a fight they did not prepare for. She reached out and took his wrist without thinking. Her hand was small against his skin, but the touch made him pause. Keaton looked down at her fingers, then into her eyes. "Take me with you," she said. His expression changed immediately. "No. You cannot be near that fire." "Why not?" "Because they will see you as the question they want to erase." The message sank in with sharp clarity. If she appeared with him, some might see it as a challenge, others as an insult, others as weakness. She could become the spark in a place already filled with dry grass. Keaton touched her hand gently and lowered it from his arm. "Leora, I will come back before sunrise." The promise felt thin, stretched over too much uncertainty. But she nodded because she knew she had no right to hold him back. He stepped toward the door again, then stopped, turning slightly. "Lock the door. Do not open it until I return." The words cut through her chest. She watched him leave, her heart pulling in two directions. The door flap closed behind him, leaving her alone with the fire and the echo of the drum. She stood still for a long moment, listening to the night. The silence inside the lodge pressed around her. Her thoughts roamed through everything she'd learned. Her father's pact, Keaton's position, the men hiding in shadows, the warriors on the ridge who wanted to judge their union. She moved closer to the door but didn't open it. Instead, she pressed her ear against the hide, listening to the faint footsteps fading into darkness. The drum kept calling him farther and farther away. Leora paced the room, unable to sit. Every crackle of the fire made her jump. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper from something unseen. She felt too vulnerable, too exposed, as if the land outside was watching her now, weighing her worth just like the warriors would weigh Keaton's. A sudden sound made her spin. Not wind, not fire. A faint scrape near the back wall of the lodge. Her heart hammered. She stepped back, her breath shaking. She stared hard at the shadows. The scrape came again, soft but clear. Someone was there. She forced herself to speak. "Who is that?" No answer. She backed up until her legs touched the bed. The scrape came once more, but this time it was followed by a small voice, careful and soft. A girl stepped from the shadows, thin, wrapped in a wool shawl too large for her shoulders. Her face was pale with fear, her eyes wide. Leora had never seen her before. She couldn't be older than 12. Leora stepped closer slowly. "Who are you?" The girl looked around as if expecting someone dangerous to burst inside at any moment. Then she spoke, barely more than a whisper. "My name is Nera. I came down from Hawk Ridge. I followed the men who came earlier. I heard things I should not have heard." Leora knelt down, trying to keep her voice steady. "What things?" The girl swallowed. "They are not judging Keaton. They are hunting him. And you." Leora's heart stopped. "Why?" Nera looked toward the door, as if the darkness might swallow them both. "Because if Keaton refuses their demand, someone else will take his place. And that man has sworn to destroy the pact your father made." Leora felt the world tilt. "Who is this man?" Nera hesitated, trembling. "His name is Tecker. He believes your marriage curses the land." Leora felt cold rush across her skin. She'd heard the name once before, whispered in passing by a trader. Tecker, a warrior known for harsh judgments, a man who refused outsiders, a man who saw peace as weakness. Before Leora could speak again, Nera grabbed her hand. "You cannot let Keaton go to that council alone. Tecker has set a trap. He wants to end the bond between your people and ours by ending Keaton himself." Leora felt the fire behind her flicker hard, sending sparks into the air. Outside, the drum beat grew faster. Nera's grip tightened. "If you do not stop him, you will hear that drum again before dawn, and the beat will not be calling for counsel. It will be calling for death." For a moment, Leora couldn't breathe. The fire behind her seemed to dim, shadows gathering around the walls, as if the lodge itself understood the danger settling over them. Nera's small hand clung to hers with surprising strength. The girl's eyes carried a fear far too old for someone so young, and that alone told Leora she wasn't lying. Leora steadied her voice. "How do you know all this?" Nera looked down at her worn shoes, her voice trembling. "My brother served Hawkridge. He followed Tekker. He believed everything Tekker said until he saw what Tekker planned. He tried to warn someone, but he was caught." Her breath hitched. "They beat him for speaking. He ran. He told me to hide. Then he told me to watch the men in the valley, to watch what Tekker was doing." Leora felt her chest tighten. She touched the girl's shoulder gently. "Where is your brother now?" Nera's lip quivered. "He is gone." Leora swallowed her grief for her. "I am so sorry." But the wind outside pushed hard against the lodge, reminding them both that sorrow could wait. Danger could not. "Tell me exactly what Tekker plans," she said. Nera stepped closer to the fire as if cold had seeped into her bones. "Tekker wants to take Keaton's place as the voice of Hawk Ridge. But first, he must prove Keaton is weak. The council tonight is no council. It is a trap. When Keaton walks into the circle, Tekker will accuse him of breaking the old promise. He will say the pact is a lie, and when Keaton tries to defend it, Tekker will strike." Leora felt her heartbeat thunder in her ears. "Strike? How?" Nera looked at her with wide, sad eyes. "He will challenge Keaton before anyone can speak. A challenge cannot be refused. It is law." Leora stepped back as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Keaton would walk straight into a fight he didn't choose, against a man who had planned every step of it, a man who wanted to end him. She turned toward the door, her hands trembling. "I have to go after him." Nera grabbed her arm. "You cannot go alone. Tekker has men waiting. They will watch every path." Leora pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to think, trying to breathe past the fear wrapping around her ribs. She'd lived her whole life surviving storms and hardship, but nothing felt like this. Nothing felt like knowing the man who had sworn to protect her was walking toward danger because of her. She looked at Nera again. "Why are you helping me?" Nera's voice softened. "Because Keaton once saved my brother, and because the pact your father made saved our people. Not everyone from Hawk Ridge agrees with Tekker. Some of us want peace. But if Keaton falls, Tekker will rise, and peace will fall with him." Leora felt a fire inside her begin to climb. She paced, her thoughts racing. Keaton had told her not to follow, but he'd given that order believing the council was honest. He didn't know the trap waiting for him. He didn't know Tekker had already decided the outcome. She stopped pacing suddenly. "I need a horse." Nera nodded fast. "I know where Keaton keeps one ready. He said it was for emergencies." Leora grabbed her cloak and pulled it over her shoulders. Her hands trembled, but her steps did not. She'd spent years believing she was small, believing she needed protection. But now she felt something different rising inside her, something fierce. She couldn't let Keaton face this alone, not when the danger came from a lie twisted through generations. Nera followed her to the door. "You must take the west path. The Ridgemen are watching the others." Leora held the girl's hand for a moment. "You are braver than you know." Nera lowered her head. "My brother loved the peace Keaton tried to protect. I want to protect it too." The words pressed painfully close to Leora's heart. She opened the lodge door. The cold night rushed in, full of wild wind and distant drums. She stepped outside, the ground icy beneath her boots. Nera pointed toward the trees where a small corral sat hidden in the shadows. Leora hurried toward it, her breath coming fast, every heartbeat louder than the last. A chestnut horse lifted its head as she approached. It was strong, broad, and restless, sensing the tension in the air. She stroked its neck with trembling fingers. "Please, I need your strength tonight." The horse snorted softly, as if understanding, and allowed her to mount. She turned back to Nera, who stood clutching the doorframe of the lodge. "Stay inside. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone." Nera nodded. Leora tugged the reins and urged the horse forward. The night swallowed her. Wind tore at her cloak as she rode hard across the valley. The land looked different now. Darker, sharper, as if danger had carved new shapes into the hills. The drum beats grew louder with every stride, echoing against the stones. She felt each one pulsing through her chest like a warning. An old Apache trail stretched ahead, winding through pines and jagged rocks. She remembered Keaton's voice telling her once that the west path was the safest in the dark. It hugged the mountain, but stayed hidden by cliffs. Tonight she prayed that would be true. Halfway up the ridge, she slowed the horse to listen. The wind carried something strange, a murmur, voices in the distance. She moved closer, careful not to disturb a single stone. Beneath a rocky ledge, she saw two men crouched near a burning torch, speaking quietly. She slid off the horse and hid behind a boulder, listening. One of the men said, "Tecker said the challenge will be quick. Keaton will not stand long." The other man snorted. "Good. That pact should have died years ago. The valley does not deserve peace bought by lies." Leora clenched her teeth to keep herself silent. Rage burned in her chest. Her father had died believing the pact meant something. Keaton lived by honor that few men understood. And these men spoke of both as if they were nothing. Her fingers curled into fists. She wanted to step out, scream, throw rocks, anything. But she couldn't. Not yet. She needed to reach Keaton before Tecker did. She waited until the men shifted their attention toward the torch. Then she slipped silently back to her horse and rode on. The ridge grew steeper, the air colder, the drum louder. Soon she saw it, a ring of fire up ahead, shadows of men standing in a wide circle. Their figures looked tall and unmoving, like ancient guardians of something she had no right to enter. Her heart pounded as she guided her horse closer. She could make out Keaton standing inside the circle, alone, cloak billowing behind him in the wind. His posture was strong, his head high. But she could see the tension in the way his hands stayed near his belt. Tecker stood opposite him, tall and narrow-eyed, flames catching the sharp angles of his face. His gaze held triumph. Not yet spoken, but already claimed. Leora slid off the horse and hid behind large stones at the edge of the clearing. She watched as Tecker lifted his chin. "Keaton of the Valley," he declared, "you stand accused of breaking the honor of your bloodline." Keaton's voice thundered back. "My honor is not judged by men who twist the truth." A murmur rose through the crowd. Tecker's smile was cold. "Your marriage weakens the pact, weakens you, weakens us." Keaton's jaw tightened. "My marriage strengthens what your anger seeks to destroy." Several men shifted uneasily. Tecker stepped forward. "Then face me here, now." A challenge. Leora's breath caught. Keaton had no choice. No man could refuse. Not in this circle of fire, not in front of men who had waited for this moment. But she saw something the others didn't. Keaton's eyes flicked once, only once, toward the shadows beyond the circle. Toward her. Her breath trembled. He knew she was here. Tecker lifted his weapon, the blade reflecting firelight. Keaton reached for his. The circle tightened. The drum beats stopped. Silence fell so heavy it bruised the air. Leora felt every muscle in her body lock in place as Tecker stepped closer, the fire casting his shadow long across the ground. The challenge had begun, and Keaton stood alone. Unless she stepped into the fire before it was too late. But here's what nobody expected. Here's the twist that changed everything. Leora didn't remember deciding to move. Her body simply obeyed the fear tightening around her heart. Before Tecker's blade could rise any higher, she stepped out from behind the stones and walked straight into the circle of firelight. The crowd gasped. Warriors stepped back as if a spirit had crossed their path. Keaton's eyes widened, sharp with shock. Tecker's expression twisted fast, from arrogance to fury. Leora stood between them, breath shaking, but back straight. She felt the heat of the fire behind her, the cold glint of Tecker's blade before her, the steady presence of Keaton just a step behind. The circle fell silent, almost afraid to breathe. Tecker snarled. "She has no place here." Leora lifted her chin. "I have every place here. I am the daughter of the man who made the pact that saved both our families. You judge Keaton for a bond he did not break. You judge him for honoring a promise. And you blame me for a past I did not choose. but I will not let you twist it into a weapon." Whispers rippled through the circle. Several warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Tekker stepped forward. "Move aside, girl. This is warrior business." Leora didn't move. "My father risked his life to save your elder. That pact stands because brave men chose peace over pride. But you want pride back. You want the old fires of war. You want a reason to spill blood so you can rise as leader. But the truth is clear. You are not fighting for honor. You are fighting for power." Tekker's jaw tightened. Enough. Before he could step closer, Keaton moved beside her, placing himself half a step in front of her. His voice dropped low but strong. "Leora, go back." She met his eyes, refusing to move. "You told me to stay safe. But you did not know the danger waiting for you. I will not leave you to face it alone." Keaton looked at her with a mixture of fear and pride. She could see the war inside him, the instinct to shield her fighting against the respect he carried for her courage. Tekker raised his blade higher. "She makes you weak." Keaton's voice thundered across the circle. "She makes me stronger than you will ever be." The fire snapped high, as if answering his words. Gasps spread through the warriors like wind. Tekker's face twisted with rage. He lunged forward, but Keaton was faster. His blade swept upward, meeting Tekker's strike with a force that sent sparks flying. Leora stumbled back as the two men collided. The circle erupted in shouts, warriors stepping aside as steel clashed in front of them. Keaton fought like a man defending not just his life, but his people, his pact, and his wife. Tekker fought with wild anger, each swing fueled by years of resentment. The firelight flashed along their blades, their silhouettes moving fast and sharp. Leora stood at the edge, trembling, but refusing to look away. Her hands curled into tight fists. She whispered a silent plea for Keaton's safety, for the pact her father died believing in, for Nera's hope, for peace. Tekker swung hard, aiming at Keaton's side. Keaton blocked, sparks lighting the air. The warriors watching leaned in, their breaths frozen. Another strike, another block, another moment of danger. But then Tekker made a mistake. He stepped too far left, trying to force Keaton into the fire. Keaton pivoted with controlled precision. He struck Tekker's blade aside and pushed him back with the strength of a man who had fought for honor all his life. Tekker stumbled. The circle watched in stunned silence as Keaton's blade stopped at Tekker's throat. No one moved. Even the fire grew quiet. Keaton spoke, his voice deep with final judgment. "I do not kill for pride. I do not kill for fear. I only kill when I must. And you, Tekker, have forced enough blood into the land." Tekker's chest heaved. His blade lay on the ground at Leora's feet. Keaton stepped back. "Stand up. Face what you tried to destroy. Face the people you tried to lead through lies." Tekker rose slowly. His eyes darted around the circle, looking for someone to support him. But no one stepped forward. Not one man raised a voice for him. The truth had settled over them like a blanket of cold clarity. An elder stepped into the firelight, his beard long, his shoulders wrapped in a ceremonial robe. He spoke with calm authority. "Tekker, son of Hawk Ridge, you sought power by twisting stories of the pact. You sought leadership through fear. But truth has revealed you tonight." Tekker's shoulders sagged. His eyes fell. The elder turned to Keaton. "You showed strength without cruelty, honor without bloodlust. This is the way of true warriors. The pact stands strong in you." The circle of men bowed their heads in agreement. Then the elder turned toward Leora. The firelight softened on his face. "Your courage tonight saved a life, and it saved peace. No outsider has stepped into this circle before. But you stepped in not as an outsider, but as daughter of the valley, as wife of our warrior. You have earned a place in this bond." Leora felt tears gather in her eyes, but she held them back, standing tall. Keaton reached for her hand, pulling her gently into his side. His touch was steady, his breath warm against her temple. The fear she'd carried all night melted into relief that shook her knees. Nera stepped from the shadows then, surprising everyone, She moved straight to the elder, bowing her head. The elder laid a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of protection. Keaton gave the girl a nod of gratitude. Leora walked to her and hugged her tight. "You saved us," Leora whispered. Nera shook her head. "No. You saved Keaton. You saved the pact." The circle of warriors broke apart slowly, each man returning to the shadows of the ridge. The fire dimmed as the flames settled low. Tekker was taken away by two elders who would judge his path from here. Leora and Keaton stood alone at the center, the fire now a soft glow at their feet. Keaton turned her to face him. His hands framed her face gently. "Leora, you walked into a place no one has dared to step. You risked everything for me." She leaned into his hands, her voice soft. "I could not let the man I married walk to danger alone." Keaton rested his forehead against hers. "When you stepped into the fire, I saw the strength of a woman who carries more courage than 100 warriors. You did not weaken me. You made me whole." Leora held his arms, her breath warming his chest. "And you made me feel safe for the first time in my life." He kissed her gently, a slow promise against her lips. When they rode back toward the valley, dawn was just touching the sky. The land glowed soft and gold. Peace hung over the plains like a gift from the old gods. Nera rode behind them, wrapped in a warm shawl. She would stay under Keaton's protection now. The valley would welcome her. The pact would protect her, just as her brother once protected their people. As they reached the lodge, Leora looked up at the sunrise and felt a steadiness fill her chest. She had stepped into danger and found her strength. Keaton had fought for honor and kept his heart untouched by hate. The old promise between their families stood stronger than ever. She turned to Keaton. "What happens now?" Keaton smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now we build a life that both our worlds can respect. A life where peace is worth fighting for. A life together." Leora leaned into his side as they stepped inside their home. The fire there burned warm. The land outside felt safe. The bond between them, born out of a promise older than both their lives, had risen stronger than any blade raised against it. Their story began in fear and shadows, but it would continue in strength, in trust, in love strong enough to hold a valley in peace. If you enjoyed this story of courage, love, and the warrior's bride who changed everything, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below telling me which moment hit you hardest. Was it when Leora stepped into the fire circle, or when Keaton defended her before the warriors? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next story.